fuck. I immediately forgot what I was going to say. Sometimes it's more important to put in the reps than necessarily know what you're doing. Welcome, everyone, to Parking Lot Philosophy, the only show where getting to work late means we have less time for the podcast. I'm a little bit behind schedule this morning, so I thought, we're about 2 weeks into me doing this podcast. So I wanted to, talk and introduce myself a little bit. I've talked a bit about myself, but I never really necessarily introduced like what the podcast is or what the ideas are or things like that. So I thought this would be a good time. I am someone who likes to journal, who likes to reflect on things, and I also feel like there's not a lot of podcasts that do that necessarily now. I know, I think the Daily Stoic is a podcast that a lot of people talk about that's really good. I think I listened to it at one point and I was just like, this really isn't for me. And I'm also the type of person who's really creative and has ideas all the time, but sometimes has trouble actually executing. And so I was like, you know what? I'm already journaling. I'm already reflecting on things. I want to make something. I want to make something that I can be easily consistent in. We're going to make a podcast. And I was like, main thing, I want the podcast to be as simple to make as possible. So I was like, how can I do that? Boom. In the morning, before I go into work, riffing. Most of my ideas and stuff actually comes from my commute. I don't listen to music. That's one thing that I've kind of started doing more. I don't remember what the interview and article I had read and listened to was, but it was all about how little moments of silence and reflection and things like that you can build into your day really help expand your thought process and your thinking. And one of the things that professor had talked about was how your commute is the perfect time to just not have any music, be perfectly in the moment and do all this stuff. So I've been really trying to do that. And I think that fosters this podcast really well. And then also too, technology wise, it's just my phone. And then these Saramonic microphones. These are actually really nice. The sound is a little bit silly. I think more than anything that's my fault though, because I talk really loud. I tend to do that. My wife says I talk really loud, and I think my coworkers, they won't say that, but I think I am very loud, so I make that joke quite often. It's just always one of those things. I've always had a voice that projects a lot. I don't necessarily have a high-pitched, or I think I have a pretty mid-tone voice. I think it's probably a bit higher pitched than I hear it anyway. Yeah, that's the basic stuff, pretty simple premise and everything. It's one of those things, it's been fun to do it the past few weeks. It's definitely different. I don't know. It's kind of just talking to myself, to a friend. I don't know. I have a lot of friends that will just chat once every few weeks, and we'll just talk about life and stuff like that. And that was kind of an inspiration for this. But yeah, I think it's one of those things that I just, I wanted to talk, and I wanted to kind of share some of these thoughts, some of the things I've been thinking. Sorry, I'm getting a text. Luckily not from my boss about being late. My boss is very chill. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to think of other things that might be of interest to know about me. I've got 2 degrees. I've got a film degree, and I've got a marketing/advertising degree. That kind of fosters a lot of my interest in things, but I work in higher education right now. I'm kind of looking at stepping up the ladder a little bit. There's some communications related roles right now that are kind of coming up, and so that'll be really exciting and might change what this podcast looks like and everything. It might change whether I can even do it or things like that. So there's a lot going on in my life. And I think that also too, that's like, if we look at the mind map of all of the subjects that kind of link to this podcast, I think that's one of them, is like jobs, employment, kind of life path. I feel like especially anyone anyone who's recently graduated or going to be graduating is kind of in a moment in their lives where they're thinking about, what's their place and things like that. And I'm lucky to, within, I don't know, probably less than 6 months. Within less than 6 months, I had a salaried position with my own office. I am lucky in a lot of ways in my career, having kind of gotten that opportunity right away. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it. It's when there's like those high stress moments, where I'm like, I'm not really paid enough for this level of stress. However, I think a lot of that stress is kind of self-induced. So it's not like I should be very stressed, because my work is amazing. My colleagues are great, and most of the time I'm not too overwhelmed with work. But every once in a while there are those moments. So I'm in an interesting spot in my life. I think I'm getting to the point where I'm far enough into like actually living life, where I'm kind of calming down a little bit. I think so much of our lives for the first 22 years is you're living someone else's life, more or less. You're loading the character before you actually start into the game. And so it's really hard to recognize that right now I'm level 1, even though I've got +2 to marketing and +1 to film. Technically I have degrees in both, but we're just going to say it like that. Even though I have those bonus stats, or I have my background, if we're thinking about a D&D character, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not starting at level 1. I'm starting at level 1. My timer is up, but we're gonna finish this thought. Starting at level 1, and so it is kind of tough to not get an ego a little bit, and not want to go quicker. But I'm in a spot in my life where I'm trying to reflect on things. I'm trying to better myself. I think more than anything, half of these videos are for myself, and I'll probably be all 3 views, going back and listening and being like, yeah, this is why I need to sleep better. This is why I need to, apply myself more. This is the things that I'm thinking at the time. And even too, I can see a year from now looking back at some of these episodes and being like, yeah, I can see what my headspace was then. Or it's, oh yeah, that applies perfectly right now. Here's you talking about it, how dumb you're being for, still having a terrible sleep schedule or things like that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm in an interesting spot. I didn't have a ton of time this morning, and I'm kind of rushing in, so I thought I'd go ahead and chat a little bit about this. But I need to get to work. My timer went off. Yeah, thank you all for watching. We'll have a more specific episode tomorrow. Bye for now.